Good morning, and thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Becky Siekmeyer, and I'm the director of the SciTechsperience Internship Program at MHTA. I'm here today with my colleague, Jonah Kaplan, who is the Assistant Program Manager for SciTechsperience. This webinar is part of the SciTechsperience webinar series, and our topic today is how to host a successful internship for both you and your student. I'll introduce our guests in just a moment, but before we get started, let's cover a few housekeeping items. If you've dialed in by phone and haven't already done so, please select telephone in the control panel and enter your audio PIN number in the audio panel to eliminate echo. And if you're having any technical or sound issues, please contact GoToWebinar at the link shown on the screen. I should advance my slides. Or give them a call at 1-877-582-7011. You have all joined this webinar in listen-only mode, which means everyone but the presenters are muted. However, we do want to hear from you, so use the questions window in the control panel at any time. Jonah will be monitoring this box throughout the webinar and will be sure to let us know when questions come up. If you'd like to review this webinar later, we will be sending out a recording in an email tomorrow, and it will also be posting it on our website, which is scitechmn.org. All right, as I mentioned, today's webinar is part of the SciTechsperience webinar series. SciTechsperience connects small for-profit Minnesota companies in science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing sectors with college STEM majors for paid internships. This is a free, statewide, state-funded program. We are funded by an appropriation from the Minnesota State Legislature. The program grant is managed by DEED, which is the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, and the program is administered by the Minnesota High Tech Association. So that's where Jonah and I work. SciTechsperience has been around since the pilot launched in 2012, and since then we've placed more than 690 students in internships. In 2015, the legislature appropriated $2 million for SciTechsperience for the current biennium, and this funding provides employers with a cash reimbursement of 50% of their interns' wages. That reimbursement is worth up to $2,500. There are absolutely no fees to participate, and companies make the hiring decisions. As of today, we have just under 175 wage matches remaining for 2017, so it's definitely not too late to get in and get started. You can learn more about the program and enroll at scitechmn.org, and we'll provide full contact information at the end of this presentation. All right, so today we're going to talk with representatives of two small companies involved in SciTechsperience to hear how they approach internships. Our guests today are Lauren Horsager and Courtney Jones. Lauren is the CEO and founding partner of Mobile Composer. Lauren has more than 20 years of experience building teams that deliver software solutions and in managing consulting organizations. For the past 6 years, he has led mobile teams helping numerous companies develop over 60 mobile apps. His experience in building great teams and focus on solving the right problems has led to 2 of these apps being featured by Apple as best practices for delivering sales and marketing solutions for an enterprise. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you.
Courtney is the program manager for Rebiotics, a biotechnology company working to harness the power of human bacteria to treat complex diseases. Her role is to align all departments to the company's goals, which include several clinical trials, 2 product lines, and cutting-edge research of the human microbiome. Additionally, Courtney supports the social media marketing plan, regulatory submissions, and Rebiotics internship program. Welcome, Courtney. Happy to be here. Thanks so much to both of you for joining us today. I really look forward to our discussion. So let's talk about why it's important to have a successful internship, both from the student's perspective as well as the employer's. When an internship is done well, it provides a phenomenal experience for both parties. For students, it's about getting hands-on training, doing meaningful work in their field, the kind of experience that looks great on a resume and is going to help them get a job after college. Internships can provide students with great professional connections, and of course, it helps them earn money for school. In some cases, it can even lead to their first full-time professional job. For employers, they get fresh perspectives, extra help at an affordable cost, and they can potentially find people to fill new or open spots. On the other hand, when internships don't go well, both students and employers are left feeling frustrated and disenchanted. So here's the general outline of what we're going to cover today. We're going to discuss how to get off on the right foot from day one, how to determine appropriate projects for interns. We're going to talk about the difference between a supervisor and a mentor. We'll talk about why two-way feedback is important, and what do you do when mistakes are made. And then at the very end, we'll provide some resources for setting up a top-notch internship at your company. So we are going to take our first poll, and we'd like to know from the audience, does your company have an internship program? So your options are yes, no, or it's in the works. So we'll leave the poll open just for about 15 to 20 seconds. So again, does your company have an internship program? Yes, no, or it's in the works. So let's see how we're doing here on responses. Still coming in. We'll leave it open just a tad longer. Okay, it looks like we're done. Jonah, if you could publish the results of the poll. It looks like 81% of you do have an internship program, 6% said no, and 13% are working on it. Excellent, very good. Okay, so let's get into, let's start right at the beginning of the process and the decision to hire interns. So Lauren and Courtney, you have both hired students through SciTechsperience. Tell us why you hire interns. What benefits do they provide to your company?
Well, I'll start. So part of the reason why we look at interns is because they do two things. One, they provide an extra set of hands, and that extra set of hands comes with experience already. So in the biotech industry, we're looking for people that have a background in science and the ability to step right into a role. They obviously get some job training, but it's really helpful to have some background experience and knowledge of what they're going to be working on in the first place.
Great. Lauren?
Yeah, I think for us, it's really developers, which is what we're really hiring, is a really, really tight market. And I think in most of the cases, we see young people coming out of schools that aren't really qualified for the type of work we do. So how can we actually work closer as they're finishing school to actually train them the way we want them trained is a really important thing. So getting them up to speed and then actually making sure they're productive when they come on full time.
Nice. So you've each hired, Courtney, you've hired, anywhere from 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever hired 3. And Lauren, you hired 4 interns last year. Is there a benefit to having one at a time, or is it better to have more than one at a time? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, so the reason we hire one is because we only have 30 people in our company, so it's a pretty small place. And part of our goal for bringing someone on is to give them exposure to different departments, not just one particular role. So it's easier to do that when there's one. The downside to that is that they end up, just like the rest of us, wearing a lot of hats. So when we had 2, it was a good experiment to find out if they could tag team a project together and how that was going to work out. And that it went pretty well. So the opportunity to do that again might be in our future.
Nice. Lauren?
So we have a little bit different approach. I think we hired 4 interns last summer, and the reason we did is in the past we've had 1 intern at a time and through other programs, and I think it actually took more time than to hire 4. So we actually brought 4 of them in at a time. They worked on the same project, and it gave us a lot of flexibility. When we did this, we were only a 4-person company, so it doubled the size of our company with interns. But what we were trying to figure out was how do we actually ramp them up as fast as possible, and having more of them to bounce things off themselves was useful. It took less of my time to guide them, but we had very structured time of when that would happen on a weekly basis so that they would get trained properly. So that helped, as well as when they get stuck on something, having them, it was a much more, all the interns last year commented on, it was a much more positive feedback that you got stuck and you worked on as a team to figure it out, and usually someone had the answer. So you weren't just stuck by your limitations of what you knew, and we actually hired those four in very different with their very different skills. So we had two that were two-year program students, and they were both older, had gone back to school. They had a little bit more real life experience, and then we had two four-year program students that probably had a little more skill set in some of the process pieces that we needed. So the combination of that, we really had a well-rounded team, but I would say none of the individuals were completely well-rounded, right? And they shouldn't have been. They're young, but as a team, they were really well-rounded. So that had a huge impact on the results last year.
Nice. So Joan and I hear a lot when we go out and talk to students. They always want to know, well, what are companies looking for? And they always think, oh, it's got to be like, I'm looking for this class, or I'm looking for this specific set of experience. But could you say a little bit about maybe one or two must-have soft skills that when you're interviewing, like what are kinds of, like how are they going to get along in your company? What are those things that you're looking for?
We look for people that are going to ask a lot of questions. I have an intern from the previous program that's actually going to be joining us full-time, and she was just really fabulous about coming up and saying, you know, we've talked through this, I've gone through my training, I've come up through the program this way, and I found an issue. Can you please walk it through with me? This is what I've been finding. So that piece is really critical for us. And then the other piece, because our industry is relatively new, is having people that have the courage to be curious. And you don't really get that from a resume. So we do face-to-face interviews with our people as well. So really nobody that's coming in for an interview is unqualified from the skill set perspective, but it's really the team fit. So they'll interview with me because I'll be they'll be my direct report, but then I also have them interview with representatives from the different teams just to make sure that the personality and the ability to ask questions and be curious fits with what we're looking for.
Well, you learn.
Yeah, I agree with Courtney. It's the same thing. So it's really about your ability to learn as an intern. That's actually the most important thing that we hire for, and then team fit. So you have to be able to get along with the team, and there's just some people that isn't a good fit for. But if you do those two things, that's the key. And then one more thing maybe I'll add here. Because we don't really, it's very rare for schools to teach the actual specific technologies that we use. So we don't really have any expectation that they come in with those skills. So we actually use a tool called Pluralsight, which is about $25 a month for thousands of technology courses. We actually last year we paid for 2 days even before they started, where they had to go through 3 different programs on here that were like 4 to 6 hour programs.
Wow.
And so that's specific to the tools we're using. And then through the course of the summer, we actually lay out, not every week, but every other week or so, we lay out a course that they need to go through just to keep moving on the tools, the technical skills that they need.
Yeah. So you're both willing to train on the
Absolutely.
job, like them to have a little bit going for them before they get started. But
they have to have some foundation.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Great. All right. So let's talk about getting off on the right foot and strategies for doing that. Certainly there's no better way to dampen an intern's enthusiasm on their first day than at work than to realize the company is not ready for them. So, and the signs of unpreparedness are pretty easy for the new person to spot. And probably the biggest one is they come in and their workstation isn't set up. No one has time to train you. They don't know where to find things, or worse, the people in charge of you don't even know that you're coming. And I have a story, or Jonah, maybe if we have time later, can share one that he's aware of. But avoiding these scenarios really isn't rocket science. It simply requires a little advanced planning. So we're going to take another poll, and let's talk a little bit about what does your company do to welcome interns on their first day. So your options are bringing in treats in the morning, taking the intern to lunch. Maybe you make it up as you go and it's different every time. Maybe your company feels that there's really no time for that you need to be productive right away on day one. Or if you have something else that you like to do, put your response into the question window, and Jonah will read those responses. So we'll leave the poll open for, again, for about 15 to 20 seconds. Your options are morning treats, going to lunch. It's different every time. You don't have time for that. You gotta get to work, or other. And if you select other, please put your response into the question window. All right, so we'll leave it open just a couple more seconds. It looks like most people have already voted. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll, and we'll take a look at the results. It looks like most people say that they take the intern to lunch, 47%. 35% say it's different every time, don't really have a consistent thing that they do. Not so much on the morning treats. That's kind of a bummer. I'm a donut person myself. But and we have a few other responses. Jonah, you want to share?
Yeah, and so we have a few people chiming in with other things that they do. We have facility tour, staff introductions, and workstation overview, which all seem like great things to do when the intern gets started. We also have, oh wow, this is a really great one. We have a whole half-day orientation plus lunch. So
nice.
Thank you for chiming in with the ways that you welcome your interns.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so some of you leaped ahead to some of the content here, what I was going to share for best practices on day one. So thanks for sharing that. Let's take a look at a few basic things. Obviously, as people mentioned here too, have the workstation space set up. Make sure they have a computer, they have the login information, the software they need is installed. If they need a phone, make sure that's there. They know how to get into the voicemail. Make sure they have a phone list, like who, for other people that they're going to be working with. Have someone go through payroll paperwork with them. Let them know when they're going to get paid. Everybody wants to know, when am I going to get paid? So a couple other things, and someone mentioned this, introduce the student to key teammates and to company leadership. And again, someone also mentioned this, giving the student a tour of your office or your facility, and including where's the bathroom and where's the lunchroom. Time tracking is a big deal for a lot of companies, so let them know if they need to track their time, review that time tracking system with them, and client billing if that's something that's part of your company structure. It's also good to review their work schedule. Let them know what time do they arrive, how do breaks work, how long is lunch, what time should they plan on being done for the day. If your company has policies on dress code, personal use of phones, social media, and the internet while they're working, be sure to set those kinds of expectations right up front. That can avoid a lot of trouble down the line. And then another thing that's really important is giving students an overview of what your company does and where their work fits into the bigger picture. So Courtney and Lauren, how do you introduce students to your company and help them understand how they fit into the bigger picture?
So basically a lot of things you just said, but I think the first thing is just setting expectations, right? So what are the expectations around time tracking and just all the basic office stuff. So, and I agree, we have all their laptops ready to go, the software is ready to go. They actually install it, and that's part of the process for us, is that we want them to go see. So that first day is kind of getting themselves kind of working as a team, like, hey, how did you do this? So starting to bring them together that way. Then I think the other piece is we spend pretty much that first whole day doing kind of an intro to our application and how it works, and really getting into code and realizing that they're not going to get most of what you talk about that first day. But then we actually set up a plan that, like, the first week we actually had them do a test project that had nothing to do with our code. So they kind of got off on that, which all of the things they were learning in there, they could do, they could break it, it didn't matter, and using all the tools right, and then coming back the next week and they're actually starting to work on stuff in our solution.
Yeah, so basically their first week is getting acclimatized to the company. So they get introduced on the first day. We actually give them a little cheater seat map where everybody lives when they're in the office and who does what. So who's the one that writes the paychecks at every other week and things like that. And then they go through the employee handbook. They actually spend a lot of time listening to me because I try to take them through the safety trainings and the lab procedures that we have. These are the top 5 things that we need you to know right away before we're going to let you start any work, just from a general training perspective. And then we start working with the individual teams. And I take them out to lunch, but then sometimes the teams get really enthusiastic and also take them out to lunch.
Nice.
So being there for the first week is a pretty nice deal. And it turns out that our teams also implemented a Donut Thursday. Why Thursday? I don't know, but now that will be part of this year as well.
So when we do our site visits this year, we're going to come on a Thursday.
Yes, yes, come on Thursday. So we try really hard to give them kind of the basic things of what do you need to get all of your information set up in the system so you get paid on time, as you mentioned, but then who are you working with and what is their core responsibility? And then that helps really paint the picture of where the company is going. And then when we start working with them on individual projects, they can already tell what major category it fits into.
Nice. All right, great. Thanks for sharing that. Let's move into how you develop the intern's actual work plan. So who makes the decisions at your company on what the intern's projects are going to be? Is it mainly senior managers? Is it the intern supervisor, or both? How does that work?
For us, that's all the same people where it was a year ago. It's a small team, so it's me and our management team determining what needs to get done. But I think the key is to make sure that whatever that is we always talk about how make sure it's something that's effective for us, that's going to be successful for us. Make sure it's something that's successful for the interns and they're going to learn a lot, and make it something that's going to be kind of fun. I mean, not the work is always fun, but that there's parts of it that are interesting from their perspective that are going to learn as they look at their careers.
Yeah. We usually pick things that are department specific. So most of my interns actually work for R&D. So before they even come on board, we know what's coming down the line of the things that we need to accomplish. So our hiring is based on what are we trying to accomplish and who do we have in our applicant pool that could contribute to that. And then a big part of it too, as you said, Lauren, is that what is the intern really interested in, and what are they trying to do with their long-term goal? So we've had some people that are really interested in going to grad school. So what looks good for them on a resume that also contributes to the value of the company, that's going to be their first project. If it's somebody that's interested in going to industry, ours is a relatively new industry, so we have a little bit more flexibility on the types of things they can work on.
Oh, nice. It's great to hear that you incorporate what they want to get out of it too. That's really important. So is the work plan then sounds like it's pretty well structured in advance, or is there some flexibility along the way to make changes?
Ours is very structured. We have, like last year, we actually laid out all 10 weeks of exactly, so our goal was the interns came in and they were building out specifically our data analytics portion of our content management system. And so we had it designed, we had a week-by-week structure laid out with a little bit of looseness in there in the middle because we like to challenge people a bit. So we knew there were some weeks that they were not going to accomplish. It was set up that they wouldn't accomplish what they needed to accomplish just to go through that process, which is typical development experience.
Yeah,
so,
wow,
but then they caught up and they actually finished, and by the end of the 10 weeks, they put their code into production for us. So
cool.
A lot of our priorities align around what is required of us from an FDA perspective. So we have basically big picture projects that they get to work on, and those are laid out ahead of time, but the timing for completion for a lot of those things is dictated by a regulatory submission. So it has been known to flip sometimes. If you get a request from the FDA, that becomes your number one priority. And so their ability to train on that day, for example, for a project may not be available. So for us, there's a little bit more flexibility simply because of the nature of the work. but it is really fun to see them have their priorities shift and how they deal with that, because we've learned over the last couple of years of having them that not everybody is good at that, and you can tell them ahead of time, you'll have priorities set, but they may change, and you need to be a little flexible with that because the rest of us have to also. And when it actually happens, the look on their face is pretty priceless. So, and that again is another skill that, they'll have to have no matter what they do, whether it's forward in academia or in industry.
So how do you determine the appropriate level of difficulty for projects? I mean, have you found your interns to be more or less capable than you initially thought, or does it depend on the student?
I usually give them a test project up front to see how fast they're going to do it and how well. And then they have to take me through it step by step. And usually I already know where their challenges are going to be. And if they can identify those, then they're going to be further ahead of schedule than anticipated, in which case they can have some of the more difficult or nuanced, really detail-oriented projects. If not, it'll take us a little bit longer to get there. But that's actually what we expect, particularly from an R&D perspective. And sometimes they come in after they've learned a little bit about the company and say, hey, I know that you are working on XYZ thing. I would really like to work on that too. And then we can find ways to make that work.
I think for us it is, last year we set out, it was a huge project, and it was a complicated project using, so nobody in there had ever used any of the technologies we use. 10 weeks to develop something that we figured would have taken probably 3 full-time people to do as well. So to do this with 4 interns with no experience was pretty impressive. But I think it's partially, I don't know you could do this with an individual person, but with a team, setting really high expectations and letting them kind of figure this out among themselves. One of the things that was interesting that happened is talking about like where interns wanted to go in the future with their career, they kind of also self-select into like what parts of it they start working on. And it worked really well. One of the things, especially the first few weeks, we were really cautious of doing this, is are they working together to make sure everybody's participating and contributing. And it was really interesting. They all had their skills, and they all realized that pretty quickly, which made it really beneficial to the team to move forward fast. So a big part of it is just setting big expectations and then helping support them, make sure you have everything in place that they can reach those. But it worked really well for us. We've only had one try at this so far, and it worked great. But I think if you set those expectations, they'll deliver.
Yeah, great. So one of the things that I've heard from other managers before is that it's good to have, or even from students, that they liked having like an individual project so they had a team project and something that they worked on with a lot of people, but then if there was a slow time, they always had this other thing that they could go work on, like to fill in time. Do you work that into your plan? Well, it sounds like, Lauren, you kind of had a very specific.
We don't, because it's part, they will have parts of the bigger project, but it's not like they have a separate project.
Okay. And we do give them individual projects, and as a program manager, I train them on how to write project plans.
Oh, okay.
And so, because working in my position, I have to see all the timelines and work in the budgets and things like that. And so that's part of their training too. So they actually have to do a formal project plan with a timeline and a budget to go with it, depending on what that thing is. And it becomes a proposal. And then that's the thing that usually has the timeline of the entire course of the internship. Okay. And that's the one thing that they are solely responsible for. It's usually not a critical path item for the company, but it is something that is just sitting there needing to be done. And that's always interesting because you watch them evolve as they do their own work, and they find out, whoa, this took me way longer, or something, and they end up having to do weekly check-ins on their progress and things like that. And if they finish it, they get to do another one, and then that's just another thing that lands on their resume.
Right. So do you Lauren, you talked about having, like, every week they needed to, on Mondays you would kind of have a kickoff meeting of what needs to happen and that sort of thing. So you had kind of milestones built into their work. Do you do the same thing, Courtney, where there's like kind of goals or?
For the big picture projects that they work with the different departments on, yes, because there's certain time frames that deliverables have to be done in. So a good example of that is we really needed to have all of our clinical documentation prepped for the sites, because the one big binder goes to the sites that has all of the information in it. We had to have that ready by a certain date in order for the shipments to go out on time and the training for the clinical sites to happen on time. And so that was one of the major milestones that an intern had to work on, and they had 2 weeks to do it. Then there's other ones that are more developmental, because our company is really clinical trial based and R&D based. There's some things that you can test from a scientific perspective and have a goal when they should be done, and sometimes they get done faster because it worked, and sometimes it takes longer because it didn't work.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, let's move on to talking about supervisors and mentors. So there's managers and supervisors, and they're generally thought of as the person that the intern is going to report to and the person who directs their work. Do you guys also establish like a mentor that's different from the supervisor? How does that work at your company?
We were so small, it was me. I mean,
you were the guy.
Yeah. So, and maybe just to elaborate a little bit more on this, and it kind of goes back to the work plan. What we did, so we had these four interns. We actually started off Monday morning. Part of our challenge was, how does this not take my time or our time for the rest of the team? So we actually, Monday morning, we would go through and plan out what the objectives for the week were, and then they had all the rest of Monday morning with me to ask questions, and we dig into technology. Sometimes it's architecture kind of stuff, sometimes it's code, whatever they felt they needed. Sometimes it's design stuff. We would dig into whatever they needed that they thought they needed to get through the week. The goal was, and usually through the week there might be a question or two, but that was my time commitment with them. And then on Fridays, over lunch, we brought in lunch on Fridays, and the team would actually present what they did for the week. And it wasn't just about showing what they accomplished. It was also, like I said, we built in some challenges that we knew they were not going to be successful at, just as a way of learning some things that. So it was really interesting to watch those weeks, and especially their frustration. Like, sometimes that they went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Thursday at noon they don't have anything ready for Fridays. But they were all super focused on it, and they'd have a breakthrough, and it's like, okay, they demo stuff on Friday. We'd bring other people in. I think you guys came in once. We had customers come in a couple of times, so it's a fun process. It's really exciting. But and it was also great because in the developer world, giving presentations is not always a great skill usually. So by the 10 weeks in, they actually got really good at this, and now we do this all the time. We have 2 of them that are on board, and it's just a really good process of helping them learn how to not just do the technical tasks, but how do you communicate with people and share that and actually provide information about that. So it's partially about talking about the technology, talking about the project, as well as talking about their own experience with this, right? Like, that's the fun part, honestly, because when they come in, it's like, yeah, my wife told me that I've changed as a man because of this. Like, okay, that's kind of crazy, but
it's a really powerful company going there. In our situation, I am the person that the students work with also. But again, kind of going back to what the students' goals are, there are people within the company that have background that the student is considering following through with, and so we make sure that they have access to those people. So a good example is I had one student that throughout the course of her internship decided that she did not want to go to grad school, that she really wanted to be a clinical or research associate because she thought that whole side of things was fascinating. So she ended up when not working on our projects, spending time with the director of clinical operations, and then actually one of our new CRAs as well, who was fresh out of school, and kind of learning through them what the best course of classes to take was to be able to leverage this experience plus classwork to step into the real world to get a job in this type of field. So I think that's one of the benefits of doing an internship and working for companies that are willing to share that time, because it's a huge part about what motivates people to show up too, is that they're going to learn something new, plus they have this job that they get to do.
Yeah. So I think it's great to talk about really engage, that an internship is a way to explore, like, am I in the right place? I did a site visit once at a company up in Duluth, and I was interviewing the 2 students on how things were going, and I asked them how did the internship impact their future career goals and that sort of thing. And one guy's like, yep, this is perfect. I know I'm in the right place. I'm going to grad school, like electrical engineering, like this is all great. And I turned and looked at the other kid, and he had sort of this deer in the headlights look, like, oh, I really wish you hadn't asked me that question. He said, I found out that this is not really what I want to do. Like, I think I'm still in the right field, but I'm going to change my direction. And I said, aren't you glad you know that now while you're still in school and you can make those shifts in, like, your class choices and that kind of stuff? And he looked sort of relieved that I said that, but I think he was expecting me to say, you know, the right answer was, yeah, everything's good to go. And so I think that's an important, really important piece. All right. So let's talk a little bit about check-ins and progress. You know, people at all stages of their career like to know how they're doing. So how do you structure check-ins, Lauren? You've talked a little bit about the Friday presentations and stuff. So talk a little bit about frequency, duration. Are they formal or informal? Two-way feedback. How is that kind of interaction really beneficial for the intern and your company?
So we treat them like an employee. Our employees get performance reviews. We just shorten the time frame, so instead of doing it annually, it's like twice within the span, once in the beginning and once at the end. And then if they're dedicated to a particular team, so this year's intern will be dedicated to R&D, they're also incorporated into the standing team meetings that we have to plan the R&D work that we have to do. And then there's also a standing every other week meeting with me. That's a informal one-on-one, how are you doing? So we try not to have people in so many meetings because you can spend the whole week in it, but it's again kind of the routine of being an employee. Even though you're an intern, this is the type of information that you're going to get, and this is the type of interaction that you have.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit before, Courtney, about how when you're even in the interviewing process, you're looking for people that are willing to ask questions. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times people don't like to admit that they don't know something, and so they'll spend like a lot of time trying to figure something out rather than just moving the thing along. So how do you encourage interns to ask questions? How do you set that expectation?
That's a huge part. In technology, that's one of the challenges of managing a dev team is that people don't ask questions, and that just, they'll tell you, oh yeah, it's all fine, but they're stuck. And, you know, if you're stuck for, like our rule is if you're stuck for more than 2 hours, you need to ask questions. But most people would go a week, I think, if you weren't guiding them on that. So that's partially why we built in the structure of, like, it's okay to fail, right? Mm-hmm. Because in what we do, that's going to happen, and so we want to teach them how to deal with challenges like that, and so they learn how to think and break problems down so that you can actually solve them quicker the next time. It's not bad that it didn't work this time. It's how do we improve that for the next time, and so it takes a little while, and that's why we build that in to the plan so that they actually experience that and then realize how to move forward through that.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the main things that not a single person that's in school will come out with experience in is failing, because nobody wants to do that. And so I make it a point of talking about all the times that I've messed up and giving examples of when something should be a question like that I personally didn't ask about and how that impacted things. And then when they ask questions, I thank them for that. Because if they didn't ask the question, it would have had this, that, or the other impact. So it's sort of there's a mental training process that goes with it too. And our teams, like the technical teams that we work with, are also really good about asking questions because our company policy is to foster that. So they lead by example, and then the positive feedback for asking a question or admitting that you filled a conical wrong or something like that, and then being thanked for that information usually sets the right precedent, and then that helps going forward.
So looking at mistakes is more of a teachable moment than.
Yeah. And I think there's actually value to like the next time that they, as you learn that, the next time they see a challenge that they don't know how to figure out, they'll approach it from the standpoint that it's like, okay, here's what I think I should do, and maybe can you just tell me if I'm on the right track instead, which is great because now you just sped that time up a lot.
Yeah, and they learn it faster if they are the ones that are proposing the solution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's take a minute and launch our third poll, and we're going to kind of switch directions here a little bit and talk about how your company can add value to the internship. So besides getting the hands-on experience in their field, what are some of the ways that your company has added value to the interns' learning? And on this poll, you can check all that apply. So your options are networking opportunities, exposure to other functions in the company, introducing your intern to your vendors or clients, maybe taking them to an industry function or trade show. And if you have something else that you do at your company, please type that into the question window and Jonah will read some of those responses. So we will leave that poll open here for another 10 seconds or so. Looks like we're still having people jumping in. So again, it's how does your company add value to the internship besides getting the hands-on experience? Networking, exposure to other functions, introductions to vendors and clients, going to an industry function or trade show, and other. All right, so it looks like everyone has voted. Jonah, why don't we go ahead and show those results? Okay, it looks like, all right, networking opportunities and exposure to other functions in the company was far and away the biggest responses with 83%. 50% introduced the students to vendors and clients. 25% take them to an industry function or trade show. All right, very good. Thank you for sharing that. And go ahead.
Becky, you were very thorough with your answers to that poll, and so nobody had anything else to add.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jonah. All right, so our next topic is how do you engage interns in your company culture? And I wanted to talk a little bit about belonging. I used to work at a big corporation that conducted an employee engagement survey that was developed by Gallup. And Gallup has found that one of the key factors in employee satisfaction and probably retention is their sense of belonging. So I think this really is important for interns as well. When Jonah and I did site visits last summer with interns and companies, we found that a lot of companies had, for lack of a better term, kind of playtime. So one company had Frisbee every afternoon at 2. Other companies had like game days, and when they walked at lunch, they had barbecues or potlucks or that kind of thing. So how do you guys engage interns in your company culture?
Go ahead.
So we do the potlucks. Some of our employees have an exercise group that once a week they meet together over the lunch hour and do that together. But the other thing that we really believe in is celebrating milestones and successes. And so we actually have this big, ridiculous sculpture that's got gems all over it and stuff. And we have company meetings, and we hand that out to the person and have them tell us about their success. And we do that with the intern also. So if they successfully completed their project or they successfully did contributions to something, they get to hold the sculpture just like everybody else. And then when the really major kind of company-wide milestone are achieved, we have a company-wide celebration, and they're invited to that as well. So cool. They end up getting tied up in all of the times that things go well, so they can kind of see what we're all about.
Nice.
Yeah, we do our Friday lunch, and that's a big, that's our entire company. So it's the interns are usually presenting, but while we're having lunch, we usually go around and actually anybody that's has done something kind of big that week for us gets acknowledged and kind of explains what they did, potentially if it's a technical thing or business thing, whatever it is. So they start to see that, and then they participate in that as participating in that meeting as well. So it's I think that process of getting up in front of the whole company and having to talk about something gets them pretty engaged with, and gets, everybody is supportive of that process. So afterwards, they'll talk to people one-on-one as well, which is good because it builds cohesiveness pretty quickly.
Yeah, nice.
One thing to sort of add to that too, we learned very quickly that having an intern separated somehow from the teams that they work with is not a good thing. So we actually rearranged all of our workspaces to make sure that they were integrated.
Mm-hmm.
They used to sit next to me, which was great from a supervisory perspective because they could just lean over and ask a question, but it was not so good in getting to know the teams that they worked with. So it seems like a thing that you should know, but it wasn't inherent when we at least started our program.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point. It really does matter. Let's move now to what happens at the end of the internship. So walk us through the kinds of activities companies should be thinking about on the intern's last day or maybe the last couple days. So I have a couple of questions for you guys. Do your interns, do they give a final presentation of their project? I know we had a company in St. Cloud where that was like the big deal, was to get a seat in the room for the intern's final presentation. And if they don't do a final presentation, do you encourage them to document what they've learned and worked on for their own future reference, like putting things on their resume and that sort of thing?
Yeah, for us, that last Friday is the big presentation. They invite family and professors and whoever. They invite a lot of people. We had 30-some people at our last one last year. And it's a great time because the whole preparation of doing this weekly is also they look great and they're prepared for this. We had them also just kind of touch base on like their perspective of when they started to their so they kind of did this big chart of like skills they knew when they came in or their rating to the end. So it's kind of cool to see that growth in their mind. For the other, so that's one half of it, is just getting them to a point where they've had a success. We also roll out their code into production in that case. So that was a nice success for them. The other piece is we're doing this because we want to hire them potentially. So the last, I would say, 4 weeks or so, my business partner and I will both have individual one-on-ones, usually lunch or something with them, to start that process of figuring out where they want to go and how we can help them in that, whether it's with us or if they're still in school, or one of the guys graduated and came on right after that, so those conversations start to happen then. So.
Yep. We do the performance reviews towards the end, the exit interviews, but then they also get feedback from their different teams that they've worked with over the course of the internship program. And then depending on the project they had, they do get to give a presentation or they get to install it, which is kind of an interesting thing. So we've had a few examples where we had a sample managing plan that they actually built the whole thing, and then they were able to implement it at the very end. And that was a huge success, and that was something that the whole company was waiting for, so they get to kind of show off their design. And I think from the permanent hire perspective, we've hired, of the 5 interns that we've hired 3 of them full-time. And that's usually because of the very beginning selection process of the personality type. Mm-hmm. Because if they're really into it, they're going to want to stay around because it's a pretty unique situation to find, particularly if you're just getting out of school. So that assessment pretty much takes place throughout of how do the teams feel they're doing, and they get that feedback at the end of the time, the performance reviews and things like that.
Okay. So you both, if the student's not staying, you're both doing some sort of exit interview process. Okay. Okay. So one of the reasons a lot of, like you were just saying, a lot of companies host interns because they are looking for future talent. So if the student isn't hired full-time at the end of the internship, how do you stay in touch with them so that, as you mentioned, Courtney, when they do graduate, if you really want to bring that student back, like what are some ways that you stay in touch with people?
We meet regularly. For example, we have people from last year. I would say every 2 to 3 months, we sit down, have lunch, and kind of talk through where we're at, because we've changed a lot, obviously, from a year ago. And they've also changed, right? If they're going back to school and just maybe changing their degree a little bit or something like that, what they want to do with that. So we keep in touch pretty regularly. I think we're also upfront about what our expectations are if we want to hire them or not. But we also we haven't had this experience exactly yet, but if someone's not, if we're not interested in them, we would still support them probably to, figuring out where they want to go. So, yeah.
And I think everybody uses LinkedIn now, so they all connect with all of us on LinkedIn. So we make it very clear that the networking opportunity is there, and if there's an introduction that we can make as they're leaving, we kind of plan that out with them ahead of time. And then a lot of them actually, are at the local schools and things like that, so we end up doing informational interviews with them again later on, where we already know them and they want our opinion on the path forward that they think they're going to take. So
nice. Wow, I can't believe we're coming up here already on the end of the hour. So we've covered a lot of ground, and I thought we should probably recap maybe the top 10 best practices. So as we started out talking about earlier, you want to be prepared on day one. You want to have the intern's workspace set up, review any company policies, kind of what your expectations are. Another thing that's really important is providing that overview of what your company does and making sure the intern fits in so they understand where they fit in on the bigger picture. You want to have meaningful projects, and if it does work out for them to have a solo project that they can be working on when they have some downtime and create some ownership as well. If you have a big enough company and you have someone who can play that mentor role that's not a supervisor, that's a great thing to do if that's possible. We spent a lot of time talking about setting goals and milestones so that people kind of know where they're at in their progress, and having those regular status checks is also kind of part of that as well. And encouraging questions, making sure people feel comfortable asking questions is a big deal. Helping your students feel like they belong, and you guys gave some great examples about how you do that. Super important. Providing opportunities for networking, whether it's within your company, within your own team, or also with vendors and clients, and conducting exit interviews and staying in touch. So is there anything you guys would want to add to that top 10 list? Anything that we didn't cover?
I would say if you haven't, for anybody that's listening to this that hasn't had an intern yet, absolutely get one. Particularly through this program, because of the narrowing of the pool of people. I mean, the people that are in this group already have interest in the industry that you're in. So I think maybe my number 11 on there would be to use SciTech to do this, because you're going to find the qualified candidates that will be more likely to have the curiosity and the drive to do the job that you're looking to have.
Nice, and that was not planned. I just want to say
he did not pay me for that.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing, just to kind of add to that, is that having an internship program, my perspective, doing one at a time previously, it was a big time suck for me, and it just wasn't effective. So coming up with the plan, whatever is going to work for you, so spending a little time on the plan, bringing in the right people, it can be really effective, and it can be well worth it.
Yep, you can get some really great value out of these people, particularly since they're learning all the cutting edge things in school, and they're going to bring it to the table because they'll be excited to share what they know. So allowing them to share what they know is really a key piece too.
Good. Yeah, those are great. Thanks for adding those. All right. So as promised, here are a couple of resources besides the recording that will go out in an email tomorrow from this webinar. On the website, on the scitechmn.org website, we have a couple of PDFs, an employer's guidebook to developing a successful internship, another one called Making Internships Work. There's also a resource called internships.com that has some employer resources, and I'll have these links are going to be in the email tomorrow as well. We have a couple other webinar recordings. One is really kind of a nuts and bolts look at how to use SciTechsperience and how companies can connect to cash for STEM internships, which, as I mentioned before, SciTechsperience provides. We have another great webinar on interviewing interns and how to find a great fit for both of you. And we'll also be publishing our webinar that we did last week on writing good job descriptions, and that will be up shortly as well. So before we go, thank you so much, Lauren and Courtney, for helping me out today and presenting this information. Do you have like a 1-minute pitch that you want to give for your companies? You can go ahead and toss that in here.
Sure. We at Mobile Composer, we build mobile solutions for enterprise companies. Basically, we have a product called Orchestrate, which is a sales tool for managing the life cycle of your team. So it's kind of the cross. We integrate with like Salesforce and stuff for your account management, but it's really about onboarding, training, communicating with, engaging, delivering all the content to your mobile device, and then giving mobile presentations, which we think are a lot different. It's things like being able to dynamically go down different paths depending where a conversation goes, embed calculators so you can engage people in your presentation, and spit that out as a branded PDF that you can leave behind based on the paths you went down. So that's what we do, and our team actually just from last year actually worked on our content management, our data analytics component of that.
Nice. Courtney?
Rebiotics is a microbiome clinical stage company based out of Roseville, and what we do is we make treatments for intestinal diseases using healthy bacteria from healthy donors. So for those of you that are thinking it on the phone, it's exactly what you think it is. And our interns mostly contribute heavily to the clinical stage where we prep all the materials, and then also the product development. So we have 2 products right now, one that's an enema formulation and another one that's a pill. And they do everything from the actual product development and testing on the bench scale all the way through to the research on the other side of it. So we get patient samples. They help me not only catalog and aliquot the patient samples, but also look at some of the content of it to see how it's changed over time, both from the standard what you would guess and also from a heavy science perspective. So they get a big, we contribute to the medical field by kind of changing the perspective of what a treatment could look like.
Nice. Well, awesome. So thanks again so much for joining me today. The contact information for the SciTechsperience internship program is on your screen. Jonah and I can both be reached at the phone numbers and emails shown. And Jonah, I realize that I have my phone number under your name.
That's okay. You'll get my call.
So that'll be great. And you can also reach us through the website at any time, scitechmn.org, and follow us on Twitter at SciTechMN. So thanks, everybody, and have a great. Oh,
and
Lauren?
actually, before we wrap up, we do have one question that someone just came in with,
yes.
and it's a question for Lauren. So earlier, Lauren, you mentioned the name of a tech training company program that you put your interns through, and we were wondering if you could remind us what that was called.
This is the question that everybody asks. So it's called Pluralsight, PLURALSIGHT.com. Highly, highly recommend it. There's 2 different levels that you can purchase. One is the basic level, which is about $25 a month, and that's what we do. There's like a $50-ish a month option as well, which gets you all the code associated with the projects. Most of the code in reality is actually available on GitHub or through whoever the presenter for that course is, so I wouldn't necessarily pay for that, but the cheap option is definitely, that's what we do for everybody in our team. So.
All right, we can take another question or 2 if anybody has them. So we'll wait here just a second or 2 and see if anything else pops up. Not so much, Jonah. All right, well, great. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and look for the email with the recording coming up tomorrow. Thanks.